From Shakespeare to Sherlock Holmes, London has a literary history that spans the centuries. And while it would take a lifetime to discover all of the bookish locations in this wonderful city, in this travel guide, we're going to take you to historic pubs, cozy bookshops, and many more literary locations. Agatha Christie was born in 1890 in Torquay, Devon. She's one of the best-selling authors of all time and has sold over 2 billion books in over 100 different languages. She was also a playwright, and her play, The Mousetrap, has been in production for over 100 years. After the 25,000th show, her grandson actually unveiled this plaque here in the West End in 2012. The Mousetrap has been running at St Martin's Theatre since 1952, meaning it's the world's longest running play, as it's been playing for over 73 years. One of London's favourite fictional characters has to be Sherlock Holmes, who was created by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Of course, you can visit the Sherlock Holmes Museum at 221B Baker Street, and there's also a Sherlock Holmes statue outside of Baker Street Station. But if you're looking for a themed pub, then I really recommend coming to the Sherlock Holmes. This is a prime example of Victoriana, and you'll find lots of amazing intricate details inside, including stained glass windows and lots of paintings on the walls. If you head upstairs, there's even a small museum which has a recreation of Sherlock Holmes' apartment. Of course, he was a fictional character, but if you go inside, there's lots of interesting details which were taken from the book. If you're interested in niche and specialist books, then you'll want to come to Cecil Court. Here you'll find children's books, music books, antiquarian books, and even books on spirituality. This is even where Mozart once lived. If you love secondhand books, then any amount of books stocks a wide array of genres, with prices starting at just £1.50. Wander inside, and you can find 2 floors of everything from rare and vintage books to art tomes. The Fitzroy Tavern is just a stone's throw away from Oxford Street, and it's of such historical importance that the area of Fitzrovia is actually named for it. This was a favourite drinking haunt for many writers, including Dylan Thomas and George Orwell. Marylebone is one of the most beautiful districts in London. It also happens to be home to the prettiest bookshop. Opened in the 1990s, Daunt Books is a chain of bookshops dotted around central London. The brainchild of former banker James Daunt, the first flagship store opened at 83 Marylebone High Street. What's particularly exciting about Daunt is that it caters and specialises in travel and travel writing. Step inside and you're sure to find plenty of travel books. These include memoirs, phrase books, language books, fiction, and history. All around London, you'll find these little blue plaques that denote where someone famous once lived or worked. This is where Virginia Woolf lived between 1907 and 1911. It's also where she started writing her first novel, The Voyage Out. She's associated with a lot of places in London, including Fitzrovia and Bloomsbury. The British Library is the National Library of the UK and it's one of the greatest libraries in the world. It's home to over 170 million items in its collection and it's free to visit. The library holds a copy of almost everything published in the UK and Ireland, though of course this isn't all held on site. Throughout the year, the library hosts a number of special exhibitions. Up until 1905, Southwark Cathedral was known as St Saviour's, and its most famous parishioner has to be William Shakespeare. He used to come to the church when he worked at the nearby Globe. He even buried his brother here. If you want to see more, then you can actually head inside where there's a stained glass window dedicated to the bard himself. If you go through the cathedral, you can actually find this nice green space, and if you're extremely lucky while you're walking around Southwark Cathedral as well as the garden, then you might spot the local cat Hodge, who belongs to the cathedral. He's actually a rescue and I really hope we'll see him, but if not, a photo will have to do. Unfortunately, we didn't manage to see Hodge. But we did see the beautiful tomb of John Gower, who has long been considered to have been the first true English poet and was even a friend of Geoffrey Chaucer. We've come to Dr. Johnson's house where we're going to learn about one of the most important literary figures of 18th century London.
Welcome to Dr. Johnson's house here in 17 Gough Square. This remarkable late 17th century building today functions as a museum dedicated to the life and the times, the work, the legacy and all the people surrounding the great literary colossus that was Samuel Johnson. He moved in here with a down payment to write the great Dictionary of the English Language. Not the first dictionary, many assume it to be, but the first comprehensive, authoritative dictionary on which every English dictionary across the globe to this day is founded. Although he's best remembered today as the great Dictionary Johnson, he's an author who touched every genre of writing, and superlatively so, as an essayist, a moralist, a journalist, a literary critic, a biographer. He's an extraordinary man, and his legacy has touched pretty much every period of writers since.
How did he actually end up in London?
Although he's best remembered as this huge advocate of London, it's the absolute epicenter of intellectual thought in his mind, he was not born here. When a man is tired of London, he's tired of life is a much quoted, often parodied sentence, but he himself is actually from Staffordshire, Lichfield. He had the very, very good fortune to be quite literally born in a bookshop. If he'd been the son of a merchant of textiles or a carpenter or something, I don't think we would have the great Johnson that we had today. And he would just devour books. He went off to university in Oxford University, Pembroke College, but sadly, because his father's bookshop was quite provincial, there wasn't the funding to keep him there, and he left after just a year, no qualifications. He tried to find work as a school teacher. He gets married around this period, and it's at that point he decides that actually his talent and quite possibly his future lies in writing. And so he comes down to London at the age of about 28 years old to find work. So the room that we find ourselves in now was the parlour once upon a time, and it's effectively where all guests who ever crossed the threshold would have been welcomed. And it's also where people would have dressed before leaving. And by dressed, I don't mean their clothes necessarily, but more their wigs. And we have just to the right of the fireplace the original powder closet. So you could pop it on just before you leave through the front door just behind us, and again replace it and powder it once you arrived home, so you could be at home in your own hair, as it was known at the time.
Because now we have the expression, I'm going to pop to the powder room when you're going to the bathroom. So does that come from
it's thought to be linked to the wearing of wigs and the need to incessantly powder them for the sake of keeping them beautifully white, of course, but effectively to make sure there were no nits or ticks or other nasties kind of growing there. The powder's largely made of sort of an arsenic compound. So the things we do for fashion. There are lots of portraits throughout the house depicting Johnson and his close circle of friends, both male and female. But this portrait is of particular interest. It's long been described as the portrait of Francis Barber, but there is a degree of ambiguity. Either way, for us as a museum, it's a wonderful, wonderful item to have because we get to talk about the extraordinary and very influential life of Francis Barber. He was born on a sugarcane plantation in Jamaica. He was born into slavery. And around the age of 8, the plantation owners, the Bathurst family, sold up and moved back to England and brought with them what was described in their notes as a handful of their favourites. So 4 people came back to London with the family, and one of them was Francis Barber at the very tender age of about 8 years old. The son of the plantation owner, who'd grown up witnessing the horrors of the practice of slavery, was vehemently against this, as was Samuel Johnson, and the two of them were very close friends. So a couple of years later, when Johnson's living here in 17 Gough Square, working on his dictionary, it was just him and his wife here, no servants, no children, and she passed away. And he was in the worst depression in his grief of his life. And so the Reverend Bathurst, the son, thought it might be a good idea to send Barber round here. And it had the dual purpose, effectively, of getting Barber out of the household of somebody who believed that he owned him, into the household of someone who very vehemently believed that that's not possible. You cannot own another human. Effectively, it was supposed to be a temporary measure so Barber could go off to market, try and encourage Johnson to eat. And it's quite remarkable to think that he was only 10 years old. I can't imagine what it must have been like for him. But the relationship soon formed to be a very fast and firm one, and Barber becomes the most important person in Johnson's life in terms of his domestic relationships. Barber is very quickly educated. Whether he's interested or not is another matter, but he's a very intelligent boy. Johnson invests a lot of time and energy into his education, possibly as a diversion from his own grief and deadlines with the dictionary. He's paid for his work. He goes off to work as an apothecary's assistant. He later joins the Navy. He marries a local girl, Elizabeth Ball, and they have children together, and they're always living with Johnson. And Barber is by Johnson's bedside when he passes away, and it's Barber who's named as the sole heir in Johnson's will.
So they really had a father-son relationship.
It's often talked about that. I imagine that comes with a typical sort of intrusion that sometimes a father can make in sort of influencing decisions and whatnot. Johnson did not approve of him in the Navy. He was terrified that he was going to get captured at a ship and sold back into slavery. So he effectively arranged for his dismissal, which is a very unwelcome intrusion from Barber's perspective. And with the inheritance that Barber got from Johnson's will, it wasn't a huge amount. Johnson didn't have much to leave. But with it, he went on to open a school. He's the first black schoolmaster in England. And he's effectively the gatekeeper to everything that we know about Johnson in a domestic capacity. Up here, we are in the social heart of the house now, and it's this wonderful, bright, large, open plan space. We tend to explore Johnson's male circle of friends in this half of the room and his female circle of friends on the other.
You mentioned that Johnson had female and male friends. Would that have been normal at the time too? In societal norms, people would have kind of remain segregated. So was that unusual for him to have female friends?
It's a great question. I'm not entirely sure whether it would have been completely unusual, but what makes Johnson rather remarkable is the fact that he was a great advocate for the publication of women and their scholarship in print. And it's not exclusively down to the efforts of Johnson, certainly it's down to the efforts of the women. He passionately believed that there was nothing to suggest that a woman was instinctively or naturally, intellectually inferior to a man, which was a very popular belief at the time. He thought this about the races as well. He thought absolutely everybody was born with the same capacity. What differed and made the segregations in the first place was access to education. And really that underwrote a lot of his interest in the dictionary, was to really try and improve literacy skills.
Shall we move over to the section for the women? How did he end up meeting the lady who is in the portrait above the fireplace?
This is Anna Williams. She's of great interest to people who like 18th century translations and poetry, but she's a long forgotten, under-celebrated woman, actually. She was a friend of Johnson's wife, principally, but when she passed away, Johnson was here alone. Barber arrives, and he suddenly realises that actually to be isolated was a great risk to his mental health. So in the years following his wife's death in 1752, he starts to open up this house to anybody and everybody in need, basically, with nowhere else to go. And one such member who joins the house on a real permanent basis is Anna Williams. And she's living with this visual impairment. She's practically completely without sight by the time she's 30. And he pays her to act as the housekeeper for the property. With very minimal duties. So regrettably, she and Barbara squabbled a lot. Johnson calls her quite peevish. She's got a very bad temper, but she was the absolute epitome of patience with Johnson, who himself could be, on occasions, a challenging person to be around. He talks about her as his little sister, and that's a friendship which lasts for the rest of their life.
He insisted on paying all of the people who came to live here with him or work with him. How did he fund all of this?
Johnson's financial management is a question of great interest, and he would be the first to say it was poor. In fact, he blames his poor father Michael for not having taught him, himself mismanaging the bookshop in which he was born. All of these people start to move in with him following the death of his wife, and they all put a financial burden on him, so he has to write to eat until about 8 years after the dictionary, when he's finally awarded a pension in recognition of his contribution to the nation. Here we are on the very top floor of this 4-storey house in what today we call the Dictionary Garret. And we call it that because this extraordinary work, first edition of the dictionary, was written in this very room. Not the first ever dictionary printed in the English language, far from it actually. So one of the popular questions we're asked here is why? What makes this so extraordinary? Why was there a need? And effectively there was a real gap in the market. The publishers had a rather commercial mind to this. They knew a lot of money could be made, and they knew Johnson was absolutely the man for the job, and he would do it effectively on the cheap. The need for it largely lays in the fact that its predecessors were really lacking in detail. The best-selling dictionary before this, the Bailey Dictionary, had definitions such as dog, an animal well known. Okay, and that could also be the same definition offered for, say, a horse.
Or a cat.
Or a cat. A cat, I think, is an animal well known, or a quadruped well known, that kills mice. So there's a little bit more detail there. But you know, that's it. And Johnson is the first person to come along, really, and make every single entry unique. He's really concerned with standardization of spelling and of meaning. It's about the last time in history that you will get a work of such colossal size being undertaken by a sole author.
So I love that you have these facsimiles where we can actually see the dictionary for ourselves. What's a really popular definition that people enjoy reading?
Oh, that's a fabulous question, Sophie. Let's see. Of the 42,773 words that are described in this, that's quite a challenging question, but Johnson tells a lot of jokes in the dictionary. Not everybody knows that too. His definition of oats is a very popular one, as a grain which in England is given to horses, but in Scotland it supports the people, you know, it's their main source of food. Is a very derogatory, very sort of jibe to the Scots. But there's one here that never fails, no matter the season, no matter the generation. This is politician. Many of the words in here that reach near to or over 100 definitions for just a single word. But for politician, he's just got the two. As you might expect. Number one versed in the arts of government, one skilled in politics, fine. But his second one, this is where his sense of humour, the voice of Johnson shines through. He has number two as a man of artifice, one of deep contrivance. So he's not necessarily trusting of all the politicians out there.
So after the long, hard slog of making this work, was it ever checked by anyone, and were there any definitions that were revoked?
Yeah, that is also an excellent question. So the short answer to that is yes, it contains errors that had to be later revised. And he does something just to really indicate, even from day one in this first edition, that he is not the sole gatekeeper of the language. He includes at least 2 words, and he writes as a definition. You know, he'll give you the spelling, he'll give you the origin as it's thought to be from other reference works. I do not know the meaning of this word. He probably should have had a dedication, but did not. What he does have is a preface in which he lays out what his original aims were and how naive they may have been and what he's actually believes that he's managed to achieve. But in the opening paragraphs of it, he says, it is not for me to judge whether this will achieve lasting fame. It is for the reader. And I would like to say, centuries later, yes, Johnson, this is an extraordinary piece of work. You did secure fame, if not fortune.
The reader has enjoyed this.
The reader has definitely enjoyed it, yes.
Thank you so much for having us. How can people come and visit?
Yeah, absolutely my pleasure. We're happy to welcome anyone and everyone to the house. We're open 6 days a week now, from Tuesday to Sunday, so please do check the website.
Thank you, we'll be back soon.
Excellent, thank you.
Dr. Samuel Johnson also loved cats, and one of his cats, Hodge, is actually immortalised in a little statue on Gov Square close to the museum. When you're in central London, you're never too far away from a drinking spot where literary figures once came. This is the Old Cock Tavern, and it dates all the way back to 1549. In its day, Dickens, Pepys and Dr. Johnson would have all come here to enjoy a beer. The actual building you see today dates back to the 1880s because the original building had to be demolished in order to make way for the Justice Courts just across the road. Today you can come here for food, drink, and they also have an upstairs bar game. Hidden gems are never too far away when you're exploring this area. For example, near this spot on Fleet Street was the site of the Daily Courant. This was England's first daily newspaper, and the first edition was published on the 11th of March 1702. Nearby, you'll find the delightfully historic Red Lion Court. Now, this is particularly famous because in 1816, William Castellan IV actually invented the first sans serif printing type right here. The rest of Fleet Street has lots of little courts with plaques, as this was once the centre of Britain's newspaper and publishing industries. If you're interested in the history of journalism in the UK, then one place you should definitely visit is St Bride's Church, which stands high above the rest of the street and is closely associated with journalists and newspapers. We've come to the crypt of St Bride's Church. Now, this is the 8th church on the site here, as Christians have been worshipping here for 1500 years. There are a few things of note about this church. Notably, the steeple is very high and is said to have inspired the first tiered wedding cake. There are a lot of literary connections here too. In 1940, a bomb fell on the church, which revealed a crypt which had previously been forgotten about, complete with Roman ruins. Today, this space has been transformed into a small museum where you can learn all about the history of St Bride's, as well as its prominent literary connections. This is also sometimes known as the Printer's Church or the Printer's Cathedral because of its associations with nearby Fleet Street, which was a huge printing press area in the 1700s and 1800s. Samuel Pepys was actually baptised here, and it's thanks to him that we know that the church largely burnt down in the Great Fire of London of 1666. The first printing press with movable type was moved here in 1500. When you head upstairs, there is a section of the church dedicated entirely to journalists who have died, are being held hostage, or whose fate is unknown. Bloomsbury is one of my favourite districts of London, and if you want to get a cosy coffee served with a side of books, you should come to the Bookshops. Nearby, yet another beautiful London bookstore can be found in the form of the London Review Bookshop. Opened in 2003 by the literary magazine The London Review of Books, the store sells thousands of books from classics to contemporary fiction. Thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more London travel content. See you next week.